A very warm welcome to This World Game Changers podcast, where your host, Paul D. Lowe, embraces many crucial conversations that compassionately contribute towards creating a better life and world. Paul's intention is very simple: to help get people's inspirational insights and motivational messages out into the world so others may benefit.
Hello, World Game Changers, wherever you may be. Welcome back to this podcast episode, where today, on the 5th of our Angels with Dirty Faces episode, this one is going to be talking about a feminine perspective. An interesting one. You know, football is stereotypically, or certainly was from the era where Gary and I came from, very male-dominated, very macho, etc., etc. So we've got a lady that's based down in Brighton, and she's going to challenge us on that. World Game Changers director, Rebecca Wheele. Rebecca, a very warm welcome to you, Mom.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for having me on.
Right, so a feminine perspective, Rebecca. Where do you want to start with this? You know my background very, very well. You're very aware of Gary's as well. It's we're in your hands, so to speak.
All right. Well, I thought I'd start basically by, as a woman, and also as someone who personally in my life, I haven't really experienced violence or kind of any of the gang culture, football, hooligan culture. I was curious, what the I guess, the why of getting in a fight, what drives you to kind of to do that? Is it purely survival? Like what was the kind of feelings around those times? Because for as a woman, I find it hard to kind of relate in a way to that. So yeah, I'm curious as your thoughts around that.
Do you want to kick us off, Gary?
Yeah, like I said the other day, we was brought up in 70s football, really. It was more of a male-orientated sport. It's very rare you've seen families or ladies at football matches. It's only probably since the birth of the Premier League in the mid-90s and a lot of money came in the game that the game started changing, like from Italia 90, really. That women and families sort of got more money, people come involved in football, VIP, hospitalities sort of come in. But in the 70s when we went to football, it was basically every man for himself. You went to an away game, you more or less had to fight your way from the station to the stadium and back again. I would say everyone was fair game at football in them days. It's not right, we know it's not right, we know it's wrong. But I think it was survival of the fittest, really. It went into the 80s, the dark, I would say some people say the good old days or the dark old days, but it escalated into worse. There was deaths at football. They had Icehall Stadium, Hillsborough. It got worse and worse until the Thatcher and government turned it around a bit, where all the football banning laws of the cameras came in, and then obviously after the success of Italia 90 with the England team into the early 90s, I don't think there would have been a Premier League, and then there was a birth of the Premier League about 92. It changed the game in Britain, really, with the money coming in. And then the all-seater stadia came into effect because of that report. I've forgotten the name of the bloke who did that report from Hillsborough Stadium disaster. We made it all-seater stadium in Britain. We started attracting families and more corporate hospitality packages and money people came into the game. So football really changed in the 90s, but it was completely different in the 70s and 80s and probably late 60s as well. It was more of a male sport, So and it became gang culture, like with the Teddy Boys in the 50s and then the Mods and Rockers, the Greasers in the 60s, the Bite Boys. It was more of a gang culture of football.
So it was a kind of case of survival, and if you didn't kind of have your own back, then you're just gonna,
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I got beat up at Southampton when I was still at school. I was 15. I come out of the football stadium. having a bit of a laugh with a couple of my mates. Next minute, I got beat up. I was covered in blood. I went to school Monday with black eye, thick lips, and everybody said, "What have you been up to?" I said, "I got beat up at Southampton." Nobody would believe me.
Yeah.
You know, I wasn't a hooligan then. You know what I mean? I was nothing. You know, I was just a normal schoolboy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just started going to football really on my own. So that's what it was like. You know.
Yeah, it was the Taylor report, wasn't it, for the Hills? For a thing.
That's right, Taylor. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly from my own point of view, Rebecca, it's a very interesting question because I don't know about you, Gary, but there's times, as you say, at away games, and certainly under Clough's in this, you know, the 70s, the late 70s and the 80s, Forest didn't get beat too often, but when they did, you know, I can remember, especially when it all kicked off, thinking, I want to be at home with my missus or my girlfriend. I want to be where it's nice and warm.
Yeah.
So there was almost for me like, you know, like we've said in previous episodes, that Gary's path and my path, as very similar as they were in many respects completely different. And you know what Gary's alluded to there, Rebecca, I think it was a sign of the times. You know, there was a lot of confusion. You know, we'd got the swinging 60s and then the more liberal 70s. I think, you know, the youth were growing up confused. They was looking for an identity. And to have that, you know, and football is an immensely, immensely powerful medium. And it gave you that sense of belonging, which for me personally, it didn't work. Although I love Nottingham Forest Football Club, because I was always a loner. So, but it was a really interesting one. So, you know, football became the pitch where, you know, this greater thing where youth was growing up. You know, when you look at the 60s, up until then, it was like, you know, nice girls don't do that, big, you know, and all these kind of just do as you're told, speak when you're spoken to, know your place, you're only a child. And that was changing. And certainly in the 70s with punk rock and this rebelliousness of the teen and you know, this spirit that was going through Britain, it's like, no, we're not going to be suppressed anymore. We have a voice. We want to be heard. You know, and I think the punk rock spoke to that, this rebellious nature and this expression of, you know, I'm not going to toe the party line, you know, and that for me was really played out on, you know, particularly within football. But yeah, to come back to your thread, Rebecca, about this more feminine perspective, you know, there were times when, you know, you go away on a Tuesday night, it's a kick-off, you get beat, it was raining, it was like, oh, I wish I was at home having coffee and crumpets with my girlfriend or, you know, whatever.
That's very interesting. Did you feel a certain almost pressure to be, because with kind of I imagine like when kind of guys are in groups and you know, with all that kind of energy around, you know, football matches and people are kind of starting things here and there, did you feel a kind of pressure to stay there, to stay in that and be, you know, because I know you talk about the gang culture as well, especially kind of always having each other's backs no matter what. So, you know, you talk about going home back to the missus, but did you feel like that wasn't an option for you?
Not through peer pressure, and Gary might have I don't know. Well, I don't know what Gary's. I won't speak for Gary. He'll speak for himself, of course. But no, because I was a loner, I didn't. In fact, just the opposite. The more somebody pressured me, the more I'd just say no. Right. You know, that was the worst thing that you could do. Try and pressure me. So I never ran with the flock. I always swam against the tide. You know, if you say black, I'd say white. In fact, in those days, for people that was, you know, familiar with reverse psychology, they could have had a field day for me, because if they wanted me to say black, all they had to say is white, and I would say black, even if I didn't. You know, it is a bit of an interesting one. So, sure. No. What's your thoughts around that one, Gary? Peer pressure?
Yeah, I got pressured into joining the Forest Boys because I got attacked by him. What I explained when I was very young. I think I was still in school then, in Nottingham, a football game, or just before it, I got attacked by him in Nottingham City Centre, and then every week afterwards, I seemed to bump into him in the city. And there was a bar in West Bridgeford at the time. It was on a Sunday night, a late bar, and we used to go down there with my schoolmates. And there was always in there this group of lads. And to be honest with you, they're a great bunch of lads, even though what happened. They kept saying, "Why don't you come away games with us?" Like, you know what I mean? So I did get pressured eventually, and I wilted, and I said, "Yeah, come on, then I'll go with you next week. Where you going?" London, Arsenal away. You know what I mean? And I'll be honest with you, got the train with them all, and I really enjoyed it. It was a great day out. You know what I mean? Even though I got arrested, we all got arrested actually. But I think that was the start of the journey with the Forest boys. You know, and once you get into it, like I said before, it's like a drug. It's hard to get out of. It's very hard to get out of it. You know, and obviously I got married in the early '90s, first marriage. You know, I think in the '80s, you know, I didn't have the greatest job in the world. Worked in a warehouse on shifts. You know, you're getting Tom, Dick, and Harry telling you what to do. You know, it's boring. Forward to a day out at the football with your mates on a Saturday. You know, it's a love. You know, you all week you plan what you're going to wear. You know what you're going to do. You know, it was a release. You know what I mean? Saturday release, and then obviously early '90s I got married. You know, we got a mortgage together, and then there was pressure there. We're having a mortgage, very young. You know what I mean? And getting married. And I think that I carried on. And the Saturdays was your day out, away from the missus, you know what I mean? So, yeah, you always call it pressure sometimes. And you think that was your release, your day out on Saturday football. You know what I mean?
I tell you what's interesting, Rebecca, because you've been to some Forest matches in the not too distant past. I think your first one was at the City Ground, VQPR, when Forest won 3-1. Did Spence scored that amazing goal. You went away to Peterborough with me.
Yeah.
Where Forest won 1-0. And recently we went to Brighton, which is obviously your hometown club, for a 0-0 draw. I don't know. I mean, I know I've asked you this, but share with Gary what your kind of, you know, your thoughts were about those three very, very different experiences in terms of your I was going to say indoctrination, but you're not indoctrinated. Not yet, anyway, towards Nottingham Forest Football Club.
It must be our lucky charm, shan't seen us lose yet.
No, I never thought about that. What's your thoughts, Rebecca, about those three very different experiences?
Yeah, I guess there was a lot of diversity, being in the midst of like the actual, like in the stadium, like with the kind of right in the midst of all the fans chanting and everything. That was quite an experience for me. But yeah, they were all quite different, I guess, in their own way. But you know, you still have the energy of it and the kind of that real dedication from the fans and that real commitment and just complete and utter, you know, it's like a kind of religion, or it's like their absolute, you know, life for I think for so many people. So it was interesting to kind of witness that, be in the midst of that. Yeah.
And what did you find the most enjoyable experience? Because obviously on the QPR game, we went corporate, behind glass, so to speak. So you know, you was kind of away from the heat and the intensity, as opposed to the Peterborough game when we was, you know, amongst 3,000 plus Mad Forest fans all singing in celebration mood. It was St George's Day, if I remember correctly. It was a beautiful summer's day, great result. I mean, completely different experience. And then obviously Brighton on a Tuesday night. I mean, what was your sort of comparing the one behind glass VQPR versus, say, the Peterborough one?
Yeah, well, I guess the one like the corporate, you know, behind glass is feels more civilized in a sense, doesn't it? Because it's kind of like, you know, it's almost like, you know, you can watch it on TV, and it's that you're completely like kind of separated from it. I guess with corporate, you're there, but you're not in the kind of very midst of the noise. You don't get as loud of a noise and as kind of much of the experience of actually being in the crowd. So yeah, it definitely is very different experience being kind of behind the glass. I think there's just a kind of different energy in the room because you're kind of a bit more away from, I guess, the game.
Gary, when you was courting, did you ever take any of your lasses to a game?
Yeah, I did actually, yeah. First wife took us to a couple of games. Quite enjoyed it. That's when Stan Collymore days, to be honest with you. So it was quite was successful. Then it was quite enjoyable to watch and a great atmosphere. So I took her to a couple of them games. Yeah, my second wife. I've just come back off the banning order after about 9 years when I met the second wife, and obviously I didn't want to get involved with the gang culture anymore or go to gang groups. So I started taking her to my first couple of games, first few games back, because I was a bit apprehensive about going back. It was a big step going back after 9 years.
Yeah.
You know,
wow.
eyes were on me, police eyes were on me. You know, waiting for me to step out of line or do something silly. You know, they don't believe you can change, do they? You know what I mean? So, to be on the safe side, I took my second wife down quite a lot with me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Any other thoughts, Rebecca, from a feminine perspective around this this whole thing, this quandary? I think it's fascinating, personally.
I find it interesting, you know, you've mentioned, you know, being in relationships and also this lifestyle and like how that kind of works together. And I guess how that impacted your relationships to kind of have this kind of lifestyle, this, hooligan gang lifestyle and getting in fights and things, and how that actually impacted your relationships.
Yeah, I think it ended my first marriage anyway, because it didn't last very long, and at the time you had to have 5 points of unreasonable behaviour to get divorced, and Nottingham Forest have mentioned 3 out of the 5 points.
Right. Oh God.
Cracker. Yeah. And that reminds me, I just got in with this lass at the time, a few years ago, and we was going all right, we was starting to get a bit serious and what have you, and I said to her, and this was my idea of humour in those days. In fact, if I'm honest about it, it still is. And I said to her the one day, we'd been going out for, I don't know, about 3 months. And as I say, it was beginning to start to get serious. And said, there's something I haven't told you. I haven't been truthful. I haven't been completely truthful with you. And I could see her face drop. And she said, what is it? I said, I really don't know how to tell you this because it'll break your heart. And she said, what is it? And the more I'm winding up, I can see she's getting more angry with me. And I said, you're actually sharing me with somebody else. And she gave me a load of expletives. And she said, I really didn't think you was like that. And in the end, she's trying to win me. Who is it? What's her name? I said, I can't tell you. I can't tell you what her name is. And I kept emphasizing the her. I can't tell you what her name is. And anyway, she slapped me. And to be fair, I mean, it was a wind up that, anyway, in the end, I just burst out laughing. And then she went to punch me. And she said, I'm glad you think it's funny, you pig, or words to that effect. She said, I think you're disgusting, laughing at something as serious as this. And I said, okay, look, you've worn me down. You're sharing me with Nottingham Forest Football Club. And we just burst out laughing after that, after I'd got a slap for my trouble. But that was, it was a misguided attempt at humour. Rebecca, if a guy said that to you, how do you think you'd react from a feminine point of view?
I mean, I feel like it's kind of prodding to, get a reaction, isn't it? Because you're kind of you're saying something to kind of what's the word? Insinuate something else, when you actually, at the end of it, it's going to be a joke, but there's this kind of prodding there. It's almost like needing some kind of reaction. So I don't know. I think I'd be probably quite cross.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say she was quite cross.
Yeah.
Gary, have you had any moments like that where you thought in your own mind, oh, this is good fun, but it's not landed well?
Yeah, the first marriage, I can remember before I just got back in Europe, and my wife was at work in town, and the draw came out, and we drew Malmo in Sweden. At the time, there was an offer on with the newspaper. I think it might have been Daily Mail, and I could get flights. So, without conferring with the wife, I went and booked the flights to Sweden, return, and I cleared off for a week I told her I was going for a couple of days. I came back after a week, so that didn't go down very well.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's several incidents in my first marriage like that. Like when we went to Spain for a family holiday, we got back and she had to go back to work next day. I was off for, I think it was a Friday, and I was off like on the Friday. She went straight back to work. Anyway, I went into town to see her. I had a pair of shorts on. Just got a tan from Spain. I had a pair of shorts on and a pair of boating shoes and a t-shirt. Bumped into one of the lads. He goes, "Oh, we had Southampton away first game of the season on Saturday." He said, "We're going to Bournemouth tonight. Do you fancy coming?" So I just got back from Spain, like, you know, she's at work. Dad will be able to go there. Anyway, pops in a shop. I said, "I'm off to Bournemouth." I didn't have no clothes or nothing. I just got in the car, bought a toothbrush from Boots round the corner and went to Bournemouth. So she wasn't very happy there either.
Yeah.
No wonder the marriage ended.
I think I don't know about you, Gab, but it's I find it quite ironic now as I look back on that, because those kind of antics that used to be the norm, didn't it? You wouldn't bat an eyelid. I wouldn't. It's like I just go AWOL and that was it. Just totally leaving behind any responsibility. I wouldn't even think of doing it now, let alone sort of leaving a.
You're right, Paul. I mean, that was, you're right there, mate. I mean, I was in my late 20s, and football's football was everything to me, and yourself, like, that Nottingham Forest was everything. So I put Forest before my first marriage. You know what I mean? So that was my own downfall, really. You know what I mean? You wouldn't do it these days, would you?
No. And I think you're the embodiment, Gary, and a shining light of, you still get massive buzz out of football. I've been very privileged to be alongside you at games and, home and away. And also, when you're going to see your son play as well, because you get your passion, I don't know if fix is the right word, but, through watching your son progress, and there's massive enjoyment in that family connection at football, isn't there?
Oh, I love watching my son play football. I went watching this morning. What a game. He played really well again, and within the first 2 or 3 minutes, the match nearly got called off. It was a mud bath, and he went flying into the mud, absolutely covered from head to toe in mud in the first couple of minutes. I felt sorry, you know what I mean? What a game. I get more of a buzz watching my son these days. I mean, Sunday morning football, it's playing quite high standard. Yeah, last year when he got that goal in the last minute of that cup, from his own half, and he went viral on all over the world, 1.4 million views. Luckily, I taped it, as we call it. It went on every national radio station, every news channel, Soccer AM. What a buzz that was for him. It was a bigger buzz for me, you know what I mean? And watching him play this morning, the 1-3-2 scored in the last minute, it just gives you a big buzz watching your son doing well at football, you know what I mean? They're looking well to win the league this year, and they're in the quarterfinals of the Cup. So it gives me a big buzz watching my son play football. Football's been my life, that. You guys know that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and I think it's my son's life as well. It's been bred into him. He's played football since he was 4 years old. Started out at Dunkirk. He lives, breathes, and eats football. That's his life. That's his life. And he had his first season ticket at Forest when he was 4. He's had a season ticket since. He just loves Forest as well, just following his footsteps. But obviously, he won't get into the world I got into. You know what I mean? He's not like that. He ain't got a bad bone in his body. He's a good boy. And that it's not that world anymore. Anyway, things have changed. Things have moved on from the 70s and 80s. Completely different now at football.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, this is an interesting question for you, Rebecca, as as a would-be mother. That as Gary will testify, you get a lot of mothers, a lot of girls, a lot of females, women at football these days, because the whole culture. And I can't imagine any greater pride, whether it's a mother or father, than watching their child, whether it's a boy or girl, that's totally irrelevant, express themselves on a field of play. Whether they're the next Pele or not is totally irrelevant. But it's that, that's my child there. And I think that's what's significant, Gary, in terms of how things have changed over the years. Because, going back in the day when we was younger, I can never, ever remember seeing a female on a sideline.
No, that's right. There was no women's football back in them days, was there? And now it's you get girls playing in boys' teams on Sunday and Saturdays, don't you?
Oh, wow.
They play mixed sports now. There is girl teams, but I mean, there is the odd, if they're good enough, girls can play in boys' teams up to a certain age.
Yeah.
You know, like Paul says, we've got a mutual friend that's was a very good footballer. She's just become coach of Great Britain police team, hasn't she, Paul?
She has,
you know, played for the Republic of Ireland, plays in our charity games at Carlton, she's played for Forest Ladies, Doncaster Bells, I think it was. Yeah, she's played at a very high level. I think she got first shot caps for the Republic of Ireland, you know, and you know, the Forest Ladies have got a good side now as well, haven't they? You know, look at the women England team that's just won the Euros. You know, it's getting very good women's football, isn't it?
Yeah. But, you know, like I say, mothers on the sideline, sisters on the sideline, you know, just watching the kids, the family members. It's, you know, it's, for me, it's given a whole new dynamic football has to this, you know, this term of feminine perspective. Rebecca, any other thoughts from your point of view about a feminine perspective on the beautiful game?
Yeah, it's interesting hearing you talking there about kind of, you know, more women being involved. And, you know, it doesn't matter what level or how good it's just actually about being in the game and taking part in, whether it's on the sidelines or whether it's, you know, actually playing the game itself. And that inclusivity, I think, is really interesting, that women are now, you know, it's quite, you know, it's quite a lot of women are now involved, whereas it used to be, you know, very much back in the day, more kind of strictly, you know, only men. It would be unheard of to see a woman. So in a sense, that's kind of like a reflection of where the world is at, really, with how that kind of the balance is being kind of restored a little bit with men and women in a way. So
that's right. I mean, look at the commentators now. There's always a woman commentator, isn't there? You know, you've got to have a woman on the panel, haven't there? You know, I listen to the radio coming back here tonight, listening to the football. You got lady commentators. You know, there's always a lady in the studio, you know, analysing the game at half time. I think they've got to have a lady on the panel now, haven't they?
Right. Wow. Yeah.
And you know what? I think football. What's interesting for me, that as society's involved, and this is just my personal opinion, I don't think football has. I think in terms of its equality, it's been seen to evolve, because, like you say, it's opened up to the. But you look at the kind of the culture that still underpins with the, dare I say, the old boys network, the chauvinism. I think that's still rife in football.
Right.
But society's moved on in many respects. Arguably, and this is another conversation completely, a little bit too much with the PC brigade. You can't say this, you can't say that, you can't say the other. But listen, that's I'm putting the hand grenade in the room there. That's a whole new topic in its own right. Yeah. Any thoughts about that, the pair of you?
Yeah, I know where you're coming from. You've got to, you know, you've got to be careful what you say these days, haven't you? You know, very careful. You know, life's moved on. You know, it's especially coming from our era, Paul. You know, sometimes you want to say something, but you have to bite your lips, don't you, mate? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's interesting, yet again, Rebecca, from a feminine perspective. I mean, you know, how do you find it, like talking to such as me and Gary? I mean, obviously, you've had a far, far deeper interaction with me, and you see me more regular than Gary. But, you know, we're in some respects, and I'll use other people's words, not mine, two peas in a pod. How do you find it as a young woman, as a dare I say, how's this for a label, a non-football young woman, and then listening to kind of the old school, the old brigade, like me and Gary, talking passionately about, oh, you know, I can remember as I said to you, when we was at Peterborough for the game, it was 28 years prior to that when Forest won 3-2 in 92. How do you find that, you know, the language, bearing in mind, you know, as Gary said, in this modern PC era, we have to kind of watch his P's and Q's a little bit more.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting, and because in my life, you know, from my perspective and growing up, I guess as a woman, probably mainly, I wasn't really, you know, football was something for me that was just always in the background. It was always kind of there, but I never really knew much about it. And you know, my dad is very into football, so I've kind of had a bit of you know, like watched it a little bit from that, and he's talked about it from time to time, but for me it's not ever been something that's been very prominent at all in my life. So it is really interesting hearing you both, when you're talking about it, and the passion and the it's had such a huge impact in your life, and particularly like talking about the older days and like how it's changed, and it's interesting how how it's kind of, it brings people together as well, I think, football, and you can kind of see that with but I guess at the same time it also has done maybe more so in the past, like the way it used to be has also separated people, so and made people kind of go against each other, but yeah.
There's an instant Paul saying then, watching your P's and Q's, this brought a bit of a smile to my face. There was a certain Mr. Clough, the old Trent End, used to have one or two songs that had a few naughty words in, and on one home game Mr. Clough had some hoardings made up, and it was on the pitch before the game, and it said no swearing please gentlemen. Remember that, Paul?
I can remember it well. Yeah, I can remember it very well.
He was ahead of his time and everything, wasn't he?
Oh, massively so.
Yeah,
massively so. Unbelievably so. Yeah. I mean, Rebecca, would you care to recite to us, for the benefit of our listeners, one or two chants you've heard on the terraces that you may have took close to your heart, that some would say, I don't know, maybe girls shouldn't be singing songs like that at the risk of stereotyping? Do you care to share with us?
No, I won't be sharing any, but you can do that, Paul, if you want to.
No,
Share some songs.
No, the title of this podcast episode.
This is another funny story. We had Ian Storey-Moore at Carlton Town yesterday, doing our pre-match Q&A in the clubhouse, and obviously he tells some great stories about the old days in '60s and '70s football, and he obviously some of the stories he had to tell. There was one or two sort of like words in there that it had to be mixed in with the story. Anyway, Mick got on the chairman, he gets up he's on the mic. He was Ian, we just watch this swearing. We've got children in the ground and children in the clubhouse. My lad was sat next to me. I mean, he's heard worse anyway. But anyway, Mick had to have a word with Ian Storey-Moore. Was probably one of the most iconic footballers in Forest history. But we had a fundraiser there on Friday. A dinner fundraiser for the club, and we had Craig Ignat there, and we had Nigel Jemson on our table, who used to play for Forest, quite an iconic footballer for Forest again, scored a winning goal at Wembley one year, and the other week his son plays for Grantham Town now, Gemmo's son, and we played him at home the other week, and anyway, last minute, somebody didn't let us down at all. They just couldn't make it. They got waylaid, so we were stuck with our Q&A guest. So Gemmo, being ex-Forest footballer, stepped in the clubhouse and stepped in for us. Anyway, he didn't realise that there was out, on the mic, and that it actually came outside on the tannoy. So people outside in the ground were actually listening to the conversation. And his son was playing for Grantham Town. Anyway, Gemmo told one story, and he came out with the F word. And he never swears in front of his children, never has done. And his son's warming up on the pitch before the game, and he heard his dad swear. He said he got rollicking when he got home for swearing. You know what I mean? That was so funny.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's funny that was.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, Rebecca, about things? I'm really interested because there's not only this gender diversity, but there's this kind of, there's a couple of years age difference as well, which kind of puts you in we've already spoke about it, not just on this conversation so far, but in previous conversations around this whole kind of this game of life, changing the game of life, the beautiful game, and how the younger generation, because Gary and I were angry young men looking for this sense of identity, and we found it in different ways. What about yourself, Rebecca, from this? We spoke about the feminine perspective. We've come from a couple of angles, predominantly the football side of things. But what about the age thing as well? Is that what does that ring home to you?
In what way? What do you mean in terms of like the age?
Well, just the whole, for you, is football still kind of perceived as a thing for men and boys? Or is it, do you kind of understand? I just picked up when you was talking earlier on that you was a little bit surprised that there's as many kind of females involved, irrespective of age, that there is. And I don't know, I think there's this whole diversity within this conversation, that not only with the football thing, because you haven't come from that background yourself, but also this kind of, and I don't believe I'm saying this because I don't believe in this label, but this age thing as well of, right, okay, so this is the modern game, is it? I never really understood that.
Well, I think for me growing up, football, my perception of football was that it was, for like men played football, really, like men played football. I didn't really ever see kind of women or girls playing football. And I think it has like become, there's women's football on TV now and things like that. And but I'm not really that tuned into it. So, I may have be surprised to, learn that there's more women playing than I am aware of, just because I'm not looking at it. I'm not really into it. I'm not really seeing what's going on. But I think that it's, I think that it's great that there are, more women involved. If there's something that they want to do and they want to, sport. I think sport's such a great thing for bringing people together, and it's such a great thing for health and fitness. I think it should be really encouraged, whatever gender. But yeah, I mean, in terms of age, I guess there is a difference from when I grew up, obviously, to when you guys grew up. It's a very different world. So it's kind of a different angle on it that ways. But yeah, no.
Any other thoughts around? Let's kind of open it up now to the game of life, the beautiful game of life, not the beautiful game of football. Any other thoughts from a feminine perspective? We started off by speaking about the importance of family. And I'm going to throw in a word now that, Gary, this has not been used much. In fact, I don't think it's been used in the previous episodes, but this word called love. Because what we're talking about is the love of the beautiful game, whether that's the beautiful game of football or the love of the beautiful game of life. Gary, I mean, certainly growing up as we did as young men, you didn't bandy words like that around, did you?
No, we didn't. Probably. I mean, we had a macho image, didn't we, when we were younger? Especially being involved with the football and stuff. It was all macho this and macho that. So, yeah, it's not the sort of word you band around at that age, is it? When you're trying to get an image and and trying to look the part. You know what I mean? It's no, it's not a word you came out with when we was younger. I mean, a lot of people think it is a sign of weakness. You know what I mean? Saying stuff like that. You know what I mean? Where I'm coming from.
Right. I mean, obviously, you guys have, you've gone from very dark times and you've really transformed your lives and kind of moved through the darkness into, much lighter times and much more love and happiness in your life now, I imagine, as when you were growing up. And how do you feel like, the love that you have for yourself and your relationship for yourself has helped you in that journey from going from kind of the darkness to where you are now? How has love played a part in that, and in particular in relationship with yourself?
I think having a child changed my life. Actually, love that is having a son. You realise what love's all about. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I'd agree with that. Having said that, I mean, my antics, I arguably heightened even more when I had 3 kids, because I was so lost and still so angry because I hadn't dealt with the issues that had been planted from very, very early age. Well, as early as 8 has been alluded to in a, so that seed had been planted and that got watered over the years. and I just become angrier and angrier and angrier. And yes, I mean, I'd agree with Gary, because the three biggest highlights of my life, well, actually four, but we actually lost our first child. He was stillborn. Is the birth of my four children, and three obviously currently living. That kind of puts things in perspective. Going back yet again, Gary, and I know it's been mentioned a few times, that iconic Shankly quip of, football's not about life or death, it's more important. I'd switch that on its head, because for me, this is where I totally agree with you. And I'm learning the hard way, and I've learned the hard way, that love of family is just, there's nothing to compare, in my humble opinion.
No, my boy's my world. Totally agree. When he came into the world, my life changed completely, really. But I think I had him at the right age, really, as well, because I was 44. I thought I'd passed having a child, to be honest with you. I didn't really want kids when I was in my 20s or 30s. I wasn't bothered. It was all me. All I was bothered about was myself, getting my football fix, doing things with my mates, you know what I mean? That's all I was interested in. Women came and went, you know what I mean? I wasn't really that bothered, I'd take it or leave it. It was just all about football, Forest, and getting drunk, going out with mates at the weekend, you know what I mean? And I think if I'd had a child early on, I don't think I would have been the greatest dad in the world either. You know what I mean? He came along at the right age, for me, you know what I mean?
So having him brought into the world kind of allowed you to not, to move away from your own kind of like self, in a way, like, so you kind of had something else to focus on, and be responsible for.
Like you say, it did. It gave me, I was at the right age for looking for a new direction. Do you understand what I'm on? And path in life, you know what I mean? And a new direction, new path in life, and bigger responsibilities, and and it's given me second wind in life, really, because and now I'm reliving all my younger days with my son, playing football. He's playing football, and I'm taking him to Forest again, and watching Forest with my son is giving me second buzz, you know what I mean? And not the violent buzz that I had in my younger days. I'm enjoying this a lot more. Taking my son and seeing Forest being successful again, taking him to the Premier League games, and I'm getting more enjoyment out of this. Like we said in the episode, me and Paul said that was probably the best Forest game I've ever been to, is watching Forest win at Wembley and get promotion with my son. You know what I mean? That was the great football game of my life.
Yeah. And those words there right at the end, with my son, because my son was in there, but he wasn't stood at side of me. I wish he was, but he was over the other part of the half with all the other Forest supporters were. But and I said to him afterwards, that will go down. I will never ever forget that memory. Diamonds couldn't buy that day, and that wasn't just about Forest getting back in the Premier League. That was a big part of it, because all those emotions after all those years of a lifetime came back from childhood. It's like, the boys are back. The boys are back, and I'm seeing women crying, young kids crying, tears of joy, tears of happiness, grown men crying, hugging the family, reassuring them and letting them, it's okay, but in a loving, beautiful way, not in a fearful way. And those emotions, for me, like I've said, diamonds could not buy. And this is why I totally get where Gary's coming from when he goes to watch his boy play. Because I despite my kind of antics in early, my lad played football at a decent level in his in his younger days, and I used to get such a buzz out of that, such a buzz.
So the feeling of kind of in a way, do you feel like being able to give them more of a wholesome kind of like version of the football experience is probably quite rewarding, because obviously you guys had such a negative experience?
I don't think it's just the football. I think for me, and this is why I keep saying changing it from the beautiful game of football, to me, it's the beautiful game of life. Because what football does, it's one of many mediums that allows that togetherness. In Gary's case, being able to share that experience with his son. He's alluded to scoring that last minute winner today. You cannot explain how that feels as a parent, when you see your son or daughter in a team and the team's won or they've played well or whatever it is. It's absolutely priceless. And that's not just about football, that's about life. That's that pride and that love of saying, do you know what? That's my child. That's my family. And you get all these people standing around the touchline thinking and feeling exactly the same thing. That's my baby out there.
Yeah.
So I suppose the burning...
That's right. It doesn't really matter how good you are either. You're part of a team. It doesn't matter whether you're Pele or you're a non-league player, really, does it? It's just the enjoyment of it all, seeing your son out there. That's what it's all about. The participation of the game as well.
Yes, being part of something. It's people.
Something you enjoy. You enjoy.
Yeah.
Enjoying it all. You know what I mean? A lot of kids go into academies at, from 8 years old up until whatever, and then get released at, Paul will tell you, get released at 15, 16. They're not playing with their friends. It's the enjoyment of the game, isn't it? At academies, I think it gets drummed out of them a lot. You know what I mean? And these kids have a lot. There's a lot of mental health issues as well when kids get released from football. And Paul's been in that game, hasn't he? He's worked at Forest doing that sort of stuff.
Right. Yeah. That's a really good point. Doing something for the enjoyment of it, rather than just kind of because you've maybe from a young age of wanted to do it, but then it's kind of got very much about always progressing and where you're going to go with it, and then actually it loses the enjoyment out of it. Why do we do these things anyways? Just to get that enjoyment and actually, if it lights you up, if it's something that you have passion.
Don't get me wrong, they all want to win.
Yeah,
you get the enjoyment of winning. They're getting that age now. My lad's 12 and he's getting to that age now. They're desperate to win. You see that the elation when they all scored that last minute goal today. What a celebration! You know what I mean? The second in the league and they really had to win today. You know what I mean? So, if they win every game, they've won the league. If they win every game, it's in their own hands still. If they drop points today, it would have been a bit more difficult. You know what I mean? You could see the elation on the faces at the end, and the parents. Everyone jumping down. That's what football does to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a beautiful game.
I've always found that interesting how, when a team wins, or you don't actually win anything, but it's the actual winning itself that is the thing. And I've always found that kind of quite interesting, because it's like playing a game where actually you're playing for the fun of it, and you're playing to win, but it's about the team and it's about like the togetherness of the team winning, rather than actually winning something, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course it does. Yeah.
I
mean, win some, you lose some. You don't win every week. It's about learning how to lose as well, isn't it? So it's that's what Paul's on about. It's the game of life. You've got to learn how to lose in a good way. It's about discipline, and it's about stuff like that as well. It's about learning how to behave. You know what I mean?
Very good point. Yeah, learning how to lose is such a good lesson for life, isn't it? Because
that's right. You're
gonna
nobody likes sore losers, do they? You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And you're going to come up against all sorts of rejection in life, whether it's jobs or whether it's relationships, and learning how to lose is actually very, very important.
Very important. Yeah, that young age as well. It's a learning curve at that young age.
And
that's what sport does for you, isn't it, as well? You learn discipline. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I was just about to say that sport, and in general, and particularly football, from my experience, gives you that unity, that togetherness, that that common goal, irrespective of where you come from or, what your labels are, black, white, young, old, rich, poor, gay, straight, all those external labels that tend to influence society and shape us, were absolutely wrongly, in my humble opinion. And that's why, for me, it is still the beautiful game. It's still the beautiful game. I personally, it's only I don't think it's as beautiful as it was back in the day, Gary, but maybe that's nostalgia taking over. What's your thoughts around the beautiful game, Gary? Has it become less beautiful because there's far more money involved? I see some of the cheating, the conniving, I don't know. Any thoughts?
Yeah, the money's harmed it a little bit. I mean, some of these players are on, I don't know, ridiculous amounts of money. But they're not in football very long, are they? So, take it while you can grab it, I suppose. It's not quite like it was. I think they're a bit more pampered. But I don't know. I like grassroots football these days. I do really enjoy grassroots football. I go to watch Carlton Town. I enjoy that as much as anything. But then again, I love taking Charlie to watch Forest. Forest, we're back in the Premier League. It's a big buzz for us. But I enjoyed the Championship. We're having problems getting tickets for these Premier League games. And I don't know, I think they're forcing the normal man on the street out of the game. The Premier League is, it's difficult to get tickets. You don't get the atmosphere as what you get in the Championship in the Premier League, I don't think. So the game's changed a hell of a lot, hasn't it? I wouldn't like to say for the worse or for the good. I don't really know. I'm a bit split, to be honest with you, on this one. I've moved towards grassroots and lower league football quite a lot over the last couple of years, as you know. Right.
It's interesting thinking about football in time scale and, how it's changed. And how do you think it will look like in 50 years? How do you think football will be like in 50 to 100 years even?
Well, I think they'll be playing Premier League games in Bangkok, China. And they won't be bothered about the normal bloke in the street. They won't be bothered about season tickets, watching your club. They'll be playing the Premier League in all the major cities on the side of the world because of the money. They won't turn it down. That will happen probably the next 5 to 10 years, I think. Manchester United will be playing home games in China or Bangkok. You know what I mean? It's just about money. The Premier League's just about money. Money talks. They won't be bothered about me going to watch Forest at the City Ground. You know what I mean? If they're still in the Premier League, you'd have to get a flight to bloody Shanghai or somewhere. You know what I mean?
Mm. And to answer your question, Rebecca, I reckon in another 50 years' time, let's put it this way, I'm setting an intention that I'm going to get a call up for England by the manager, whoever he or she might be at the time. So watch this space. You heard it here first.
All right, here we go.
we might be playing football on another planet by then, anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
Some would say, Gary, the way me and you used to play, we was on another planet.
Oh yeah, I knew that one was coming.
Well, you did tee me up nicely.
I know. I look like I'm wide open here, didn't I?
Yeah, Rebecca, I just kind of want to bring things towards. We're focused on the feminine perspective. I do, and yet again, listeners, I don't believe I'm saying this because I'm playing devil's advocate for one that works with people to strip out labels of black, white, young, old, gay, straight, whatever the label will be. But I want to actually play devil's advocate, Rebecca, and kind of start to bring things to a close and say, because you are, 2 or 3 years younger than me and Gary. You look at things not just from a feminine perspective, but also from a generational perspective. And I'm thinking more specifically about social media and the influence that has on people's lives. Maybe not just so much about football, but the game of life itself. And what's your thoughts, from a feminine perspective and from a young woman's point of view of how social media has affected the game of life generally, and then me and Gary can speak about it to close out about how it's affected life and football.
Yeah, well, I think like with most things, there's a lot of positives with social media, but there's also a lot of negatives that have come along with it. And I think in a sense it's kind of brought people closer together, because now we can talk with people all around the world, and we can, you can go on Instagram, you can get inspiration from, all sorts of different things, artistic things, music, dance. It's very creative. It's given people kind of a creative outlet to express themselves. But then, of course, there's the kind of more negative side, where it's created such noise, I think, in our lives, where you go on your phone and you see all these people putting up kind of almost the best versions of their lives onto social media, and so it creates a kind of comparison all the time. I think with young people are kind of looking at what's happening on social media and thinking, oh, my life is not this way, or I'm not at this stage, or whatever the thing is. And so I think it's created it's revealed a lot of insecurities as well. I think or it's maybe revealed isn't the right word, but like I think it has created the environment for where insecurities can kind of be grown. So yeah, I think it's a tool, and I think that it's something that can be used for a lot of good. But I think that, there's a lot of I think just awareness that needs to go with how we use social media. So we talk about mindlessly scrolling, or waking up in the morning straight away on Instagram, straight away on Facebook, scrolling through, so I think how we use it and just having that mindfulness about it is really important, especially for young people, because they're so impressionable, and such a kind of tender age where they're kind of subjected to all of that noise out there on social media. It can be quite a daunting place for them, and quite I think mental health is obviously not I think it's quite a problem for a lot of young people. And I think that social media is not necessarily helping the situation. So, but I think it goes back to how we use it, and how we can use it for good, for helping each other and supporting each other.
I agree with Rebecca. It's got its good points and its bad points, especially with the young people. You've got very impressionable. I mean, there's a lot of trolling on Twitter, people incognito, you don't know who they are, they pick on people. There's a lot of jealousy as well. You've got to be careful. Hell of a lot of jealousy, especially on Twitter and all that kind of stuff. I mean, sometimes I feel like coming off social media, but it's a great tool because I work for Carlton Town, for advertising and what I do for Carlton Town. It's fantastic for me. I can get the crowds in and publicise Carlton Town. So that's a great tool in that way. But in other ways, I've had friends that have been trolled on Twitter, and been bullied, and that's the downside to it. So, I totally agree with you. It's got its good points and its bad points. There's times you can get down and you feel like coming off it for a while, and sometimes there's times when I felt coming off it, but I can't come off it because it's good for what I do at Carlton Town.
Yeah.
I think just to close out, listeners, what we have here is, some very, very valid insights about social media, how it influences our life, and, good, bad, and indifferent. But I sum it up and I close out by saying this. Imagine in any club, any team, you've got a squad of players, and you pick, the guys have used the words tool, you pick a player to do a specific job. And if it suits, or that particular player's style suits at the time, then you pick that player. And I think social media is exactly the same. You'll pick that particular tool if it's appropriate or not. So, Rebecca, I want you to have the last word. From a feminine perspective, do you want any last minute thoughts to share about anything at all?
Oh gosh, it's a very broad question. I mean, I don't know. I think I've really enjoyed what we've spoken about, and it's been interesting to hear the kind of bit more of the background and the different insights, and I think that from a feminine perspective, I find that it's really positive to know that more women are being involved in football. I just think that that's a reflection of maybe how the world is kind of balancing in men and women, and I think that that's a really good thing. So yeah.
Okay, so last words then. I want you to imagine that the football fairy godmother comes and taps you on the shoulder and says, Rebecca, you've got one wish. You can only be a Brighton and Hove Albion supporter or a Nottingham Forest girl. Which way are you going to go?
I'm not going to play into your game, and I'm going to say neither.
And there you have it, listeners, neither. So on that non-participatory note, thank you so much for listening. We'll close it out there, and we'll close it the way we always do, by saying, remember, the game's changing. How will you respond?
Thanks very much for listening to this World Game Changers podcast episode. Hopefully you found it interesting and helpful. Drop a line to Paul at worldgamechangers.org with any thoughts or questions you may have, and he'll be more than happy to respond. Remember, the world's changing. How will you respond?